A career in academic science is often very unforgiving with what you actually do. You often hear about how growing up that there's all these sort of job prospects and the possibilities of wonderful careers in science and research. And then when you're in it, you realize it's actually really unforgiving. I actually want to talk about that and hopefully help you think about this a little bit so that you can adjust to the way that actually it's about. So when you go into a career in at least for me, I went into business, social science of business and innovation. I would have thought that there was a lot of possibilities by going into that particular career. And, ultimately, what you realize is it's actually quite unforgiving. In the sense, when you get into the career, you do everything right. And in your mind, you're thinking you're doing everything right. And you're doing what you're supposed to do. And then you actually don't have a lot of possibilities at the end of it. And you realize that it's actually quite rigid. There's very little mobility that ends up happening. There's very little, forgiveness often in the marketplace that a lot of people just don't realize when you're in it, is that there's just not a lot of flexibility. The running joke is it's fine to be in the career as long as you're working 60 hours a week, right? And there's some degree of that, but you have to realize that that's actually quite unforgiving. It's very hard to get a job, and is often very, very competitive. And so the whole field it doesn't matter what field that you're in, even in a very lucrative field like science or medicine, it's all difficult. And it doesn't quite matter what you actually do. You can do everything absolutely right. And this is the sort of crazy making aspect of it. You can do absolutely everything right and still end up not having a job at the end of it. And there's lots of people that go through this, right? Like this is the quintessential story of research scientists and professors that find it challenging. So I want to talk about how to think about this, right? So one of the things that you can do is become more competitive. And I think ultimately sometimes that leads to a downward spiral. And the competitive thing I'm talking about, and it's super hard not to be, where you start acting in a way that you're competing with others. It's very easy to do. You start acting in a way where you're very self-centered. You're thinking only about yourself. And that's very easy to do. I struggle with that all the time. But here's the thing that I would sort of suggest. That's one thing. That's one thing. You can become very self-centered. You focus on yourself, and you're very protective with your time and resources and all this kind of, I don't know, it's kind of silliness, to be honest. And then, the other thing is you kind of give up a lot of times, where you're just like, why even bother? Right? Like a lot of people just give up and they just sort of stop. And it doesn't matter what stage that you're at. I think that is pretty normal to go through that. And I think that is completely acceptable to go through that. So I think a lot of what I'm going to suggest now is to appeal to something a little higher. Really think about why you do the things that you actually do. And instead of thinking about the market, because the market's unforgiving, it often doesn't do the right thing. And people know that are in the career. They completely understand that. They've been doing it for a long time. It's unforgiving, and it often doesn't do the right thing. So the only thing that you can do is appeal to that something higher, where you think, why am I actually doing this? What's this about? And in the end, does it really matter what ends up happening? And I know that is a challenging thing for a lot of us to sort of think about, because, in a lot of ways we're not taught, or we can't think about those things. And I want you to sort of take a step back and think about, like, what are the things that you actually need in this world to survive? A little bit of shelter, a little bit of food, a little bit of stuff. And that's it. The rest of it, it's all just games. And as long as you start realizing that, I think you become less desperate, you become more happier, you become more centered. If you could just do little things where maybe you just go for walks, maybe you just look around, enjoy what's going on in your immediate area, rather than thinking about the competitive, unforgiving nature of what you're going through at this moment. Because ultimately, there's nothing that you can stop. There's going to be a lot of competition where people are cutthroat, people doing things that are unethical, all of that kind of stuff that, just happens because people are people. And they get put in a spot and they think that they're desperate. And they do things that don't serve themselves well and don't serve other people well. So the only thing that I can suggest to do is appeal to looking around, looking at the world around us and being calm as you walk through, just doing simple things. I think ultimately that's the only thing you could do. And it harks back. I often almost think that it's kind of a little bit religious in some sort of way, where you just realize, like, yeah, there's lots of things that are going on. I'm just going to appeal to something that's bigger. And I'm going to be okay with what I do. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do my job, I'm going to do my work, and I'm going to forget about everything else that's going on around me. And I'm going to do the little simple things where I try to help out other people, smile as much as I possibly can, and just ground myself in the world. I know that this is it's not a conversation that's had a lot in the scientific research careers, but I think it's such an important part where we just stop and say, what the hell? The market's unforgiving. Yes, things are not going to work out even though that you did everything right. Yeah, absolutely. But am I okay at this moment? Yeah, I think so. And I think if that's the case, I think that's all that matters. Ultimately, you go in, do your thing, do your little bit of work, go home, say hi to, if you just got a cat at home, you just say hi to your cat at home. And that's it. That's the life. And forget about the rest. So, if you followed to the end, I want to hear some comments. How are you dealing with things? What's going on in your life? What would you like for me to actually talk about coming up? It always helps when I get some feedback in terms of thinking about where you are and how you're dealing with things. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.